So we return back to our lecture, and after finishing with the biography of the great Imam Abu Ishaq al-Fazari, from the Imams of the junior Atba'u Tabi'een in the area of Sham, who carried on the preservation of the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam after his foremost teacher and Shaykh and scholar Imam al-Awza'i, the great Imam from the major Atba'u Tabi'een in the area of Sham. Now we'll progress to the next level, showing the progression of this knowledge and how the Sunnah was preserved and conveyed and carried on with great Imams that have reached the highest level of trustworthiness and integrity and precision and memorization in the Hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by moving to Imam Abu Mushir al-Ghassani. Abu Mushir al-Ghassani. And we will start with mentioning his name. He is also well known by his kunya, Abu Mushir. And his name is Abdul A'la ibn Mushir ibn Abdul A'la. Abdul A'la ibn Mushir ibn Abdul A'la. And his grandfather, Abdul A'la, he is well known by his kunya, Abu Dhurama al-Ghassani al-Dimashqi, from the city of Damascus in Syria. And Imam al-Zahabi rahimahullah in his book Siyar A'lam al-Nubala has described him with these attributes: al-Imam, he is from the foremost scholars of the Muslims; Shaykh al-Sham, he was the foremost scholar in the area of Sham in his time; al-Faqih, from the foremost jurists of Islam; and he is from the Tabi'ul Atba', he is from the students, the level that preceded the level of the Atba'u Tabi'een. We just mentioned the progression of knowledge in Sham. Imam al-Awza'i from the major Atba'u Tabi'een, then his student Imam Abu Ishaq al-Fazari from the junior Atba'u Tabi'een. Now his student from the Tabi'ul Atba' Tabi'een, Imam Abu Mushir. This knowledge of hadith, preserving it, collecting it, memorizing it, this was carried on in the area of Sham in succession by these great Imams of the Salaf. As far as the birth of Imam Abu Mushir, he was born in the year 140 after the Hijrah. In the year 140 after the Hijrah. As far as his teachers and shuyukh who he heard and learned hadith from and other sciences, then they are from the great scholars of the Salaf from the Atba'u Tabi'een, such as Ayyub ibn Tamim and Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz at-Tanuhi and Malik ibn Anas and Sufyan ibn Uyayna and Yahya ibn Ismail ibn Abi al-Muhajir and Yahya ibn Hamza and Ismail ibn Ayyash and other than them. And Imam Abu Mushir rahimahullah, it is narrated upon him that he said, قَدْ رَأَيْتُ al-Awza'i. He mentions that I have seen Imam al-Awza'i. We mentioned that Imam al-Awza'i was from the foremost of the scholars after the Sahaba, after the Tabi'een, from the major Atba'u Tabi'een in the area of Sham, and around whom the chains of narrations of the Asanid, the chains of narrations of the Ahadith, they revolve around. Those chains that are Shami, those chains that are narrated by narrators from the area of Sham. In most of these chains, you will find the name of Imam al-Awza'i. Imam al-Awza'i. So the scholars of the Ahle-Hadith and the scholars of Hadith in Sham, they used to deem it a virtue that they met or they even saw Imam al-Awza'i. They even saw, even if they did not learn Hadith from him, even if they did not hear Hadith from him, they were not old enough to hear and preserve, memorize a Hadith from him and attend his gatherings. Even just the virtue of seeing him was something they would mention that they achieved. So Imam Abu Mushir, he was young in age when Imam al-Awza'i passed away. He could not learn hadith from him. He could not attend his gatherings and memorize hadith from him. But he mentions that proudly that he saw that قَدْ رَأَيْتُ al-Awza'i. I saw this great Imam of our region of Sham, Imam al-Awza'i. Imam Abu Mushir, he says, مات الأوزاعي سنة 57 و100 وأنا ابن 17 وكان ولد لي قبل ذلك ب40 ليلة. He says that Imam al-Awza'i, he passed away in the year, as we mentioned in his biography, in the year 157 after the Hijrah. 157 after the Hijrah. And he says that I was 17 years of age when he passed away. We just mentioned he was born in the year 140. So when Imam al-Awza'i passed away in the year 157, he was only 17 years of age. He was not at that age where he could attend the gatherings of Imam al-Awza'i and memorize hadith from him and learn hadith from him. And he said, the day that Imam al-Awza'i passed away in the year 157, I was blessed with a child 40 days before this event or this day when Imam al-Awza'i passed away, showing the great importance that he placed on meeting this great Imam and remembering these details, that he remembers the exact age he was when he passed away, the year, and even that he was blessed with his first son or first child who was born 40 days before the death of Imam al-Awza'i. In this also is a benefit for our young brothers, that these Imams of the Salaf, that they married young and they had children young. Not like what we see in our times today, where marriage is delayed, especially in these times of great trials and tribulations, where major sins such as zina and fornication are prevalent, and tabarruj, and women beautifying themselves and uncovering themselves is prevalent. So it is befitting for the Muslims to preserve the chastity of their children and to follow the way of the Salaf in marrying them off at a young age. Al-Abbas ibn al-Walid ibn Mazyad al-Bayruti, he says, سمعت أبا مسهر يقول لقد حرصت على علم الأوزاعي حتى كتبت عن ابن سماعة 13 كتابا. Imam Abu Mushir, as we just mentioned, he was young and he could not hear and learn hadith from Imam al-Awza'i, even though he saw him and he considered this a great virtue for him. But when he reached the age when he could collect and learn, and he treaded upon this path of seeking the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, the persons whose hadith, whose narrations I gave the utmost of importance was Imam al-Awza'i. Was Imam al-Awza'i, the Imam of his region of Sham. So he said, I traveled to his foremost students, from them Ibn Sama'a, who is Ismail ibn Abdullah ibn Sama'a. He is from the foremost students of Imam al-Awza'i, who spent several years in his company, learning hadith from him and gathering and collecting his hadith and memorizing and preserving it. So he said, I traveled to him and I wrote from him. I learned and attended his gatherings, and I wrote from him 13 books in which I filled the ahadith of Imam al-Awza'i, showing the great diligence he placed in collecting the ahadith of this great Imam al-Awza'i. 13 books he filled up from the hadith of Imam al-Awza'i that he heard from his foremost student, Imam Ibn Sama'a. حتى لقيت أباك الوليد فوجدت عنده علما لم يكن عند القوم. So Imam Abu Mushir, he is telling Al-Abbas ibn al-Walid ibn Mazyad that after I had written these 13 books and I thought that I had collected all the hadith of Imam al-Awza'i that he had narrated, I met your father, Al-Walid ibn Mazyad. Al-Walid ibn Mazyad, he's telling this to his son Al-Abbas. He's saying, until I met your father. When I met your father, Al-Walid ibn Mazyad, I found with him a hadith that he heard from Imam al-Awza'i that I did not find with anyone else. That he did not find with anyone else. So he even compiled and collected and memorized those ahadith. Those ahadith showing how the preservation of hadith and the knowledge of hadith progressed from Imam al-Awza'i to his students to Imam Abu Mushir. To Imam Abu Mushir, and the great efforts he made and him striving in collecting the hadith of the foremost Imam of that region, around whom the chains of narrations revolve. Imam Ibn Sa'd, rahimahullah, he says, كان راوية لسعيد بن عبد العزيز وغيره من الشاميين. That Imam Abu Mushir, he strove himself and exerted in collecting the ahadith in the area of Sham from the great scholars of hadith in that area, such as his foremost teacher and sheikh, Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi. We just mentioned him from being his teachers and sheikhs, and we'll also mention him soon, inshallah, and mention some details about him, that Imam Abu Mushir strove to collect his hadith, the hadith of this great Imam Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi and other scholars of Sham, thereby playing a major role in preserving the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the area of Sham in those times. As far as his students, then the great imams of hadith, then they narrated hadith from him, heard hadith and learned from hadith from Imam Abu Mushir, such as Yahya ibn Ma'in and Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Duhaym and Abu Zur'a al-Dimishqi and Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli and Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Ishaq ibn Mansur al-Kawsaj and Imam al-Darimi, the author of the book Musnad or the Sunan al-Darimi, and Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, and other than them from the great imams, foremost imams of the Ahlul-Hadith, of Hadith and the sciences. They were all students of Imam Abu Mushir, Abdul Ala al-Ghassani. As far as the statements of the scholars in praise of this great Imam Abu Mushir, especially in Hadith and his sciences, then we have the statement of Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in, one of his foremost students. He says, الذي يحدث ببلد به من هو أولى بالتحديث منه أحمق. He says that whoever puts himself forth to narrating a hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to conveying, relaying and transmitting them, teaching them in a place, in a locality, in a country where there is someone who is above him, who is more deserving due to his preciseness and accuracy in memory, the one who is lesser than him, who puts himself forth for this, then he is a ahmaq. He is a ignorant person. He is an ignorant person. Rather, preference should be given to the one who is of a higher level in his preciseness and memory. He should be given precedence, not someone who is lesser than him. The one who puts himself forth when he has not reached that level, then he is a foolish person. وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَنِي أُحَدِّثُ بِبَلَدٍ فِيهَا مِثْلُ أَبِي مُسْهِرٍ فَيَنْبَغِي لِلِحْيَةِ أَن تُحْلَقْ. Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in continues by giving an example of this by saying, if you were to see me, Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in, the Imam of al-Jarh wat-Tadeel, the Imam of criticizing, praising narrators, he's saying that if you were to see me narrating hadith, putting myself forward to narrate and teach and convey a hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a locality, in a place where Imam Abu Mushir exists, then know that my beard is deserving of being shaved off as punishment. My beard is deserving of being shaved off as punishment, showing the great status Imam Abu Mushir had near this great Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in. Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in, he also says, ما رأيت منذ خرجت من بلادي أحدا أشبه بالمشيخة الذين أدركتهم من أبي مسهر. He says, and Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in, as we'll mention in his biography inshallah, he had a vast rihla, a vast journey for seeking and collecting the ahadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says that in this vast journey of mine, since I left my city and locality in this journey, I never met anyone from the scholars I met who I heard hadith from, the shuyukh who I learned and attended the gatherings, who was most deserving of teaching and narrating and conveying the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam than Abu Mushir, than the great Imam Abu Mushir. Imam Abu Dawood al-Sijistani, the author of the book As-Sunan, he says, سمعت أحمد بن حنبل يقول رحم الله أبا مسهر ما كان أثبته وجعل يطريه. That Imam Abu Dawood al-Sijistani said that I heard my Shaykh and teacher Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal saying regarding his Shaykh and teacher Imam Abu Mushir, remembering him after he passed away by saying, may Allah have mercy upon Imam Abu Mushir. How precise was his memory, how strong and exact and correct and precise was his memory. وَجَعَلَ يُطْرِيهِ. Imam Abu Dawud says, and he continued to praise Imam Abu Mushir, continued to praise him with great praises. Imam Abu Zur'a al-Dimashqi, he says, قال لي أحمد بن حنبل عندكم ثلاثة أصحاب حديث الوليد ومروان بن محمد وأبو مسهر. Imam Abu Zur'a al-Dimashqi, he says that Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal told me that you have three people who are the foremost scholars of hadith in your region of Sham. Three are the foremost scholars of hadith in the region of Sham. Who are they? Al-Walid, meaning Al-Walid ibn Muslim. Al-Walid ibn Muslim. And Marwan ibn Muhammad. Marwan ibn Muhammad al-Asadi. And Imam Abu Mushir. And Imam Abu Mushir. Imam Abu Mushir, rahimahullah, he says, كتب إلي أحمد بن حنبل لأكتب إليه بحديث أم حبيبة في مس الفرج. Showing the great status Imam Abu Mushir had near Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. That Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal himself wrote a letter to Imam Abu Mushir to write back to him with the hadith that he had memorized and preserved on from the chain or narrating upon Habiba radiallahu anha regarding breaking of the wudu by way of one touching his private part. By way of one touching his private part. And it is an authentic hadith that Imam Ibn Majah has narrated in his Sunan on the authority of Habiba radiallahu anha, in which he said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Man massa farjahu falyatawadda, that whoever touches his private part without any shield, then let him repeat his wudu. This breaks his wudu, and let him make wudu again. So Imam Ahmad, this hadith was not in his possession. So he requested from Imam Abu Mushir to write this hadith to him, so he can hear it and collect it from this great Imam Abu Mushir. Imam Abu Mushir, he says, قال لي سعيد بن عبد العزيز ما شبهتك في الحفظ إلا بجدك أبي ذرامة ما كان يسمع شيئا إلا حفظه. Imam Abu Mushir, he says that my teacher and scholar and Sheikh Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi, he says, he said regarding his preciseness in memory and his ability in retaining the ahadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that I have never seen anyone more precise in his memory than you, and your memory, he told his student Abu Mushir, that your memory is similar to the memory of your grandfather Abu Dhurama. Abu Dhurama, whose name was Abdul Ala, as we just mentioned. His grandfather was well known by this kunya, Abu Dhurama. ما كان يسمع شيئا إلا حفظه. How was the memory of his grandfather that he's linking his memory to? That he did not used to hear anything except that he memorized it. He did not used to hear anything except that he instantly memorized it. Such was the strength and capacity of memorization of Imam Abu Mushir. Imam Abu Mushir, he says, كان سعيد بن عبد العزيز يداني al-Awza'i, that Sa'id, my teacher, Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi, rahimahullah, he used to deem me to be close in status, in virtue, in memorization, in preservation of the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Imam al-Awza'i, to Imam al-Awza'i. Abu al-Jamahir, Muhammad ibn Uthman, he says, ما رأيت بالشام مثل أبي مسهر. He says that I did not see at that time in the vast region of Sham anyone who was close, anyone who resembled Imam Abu Mushir. The great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, rahimahullah, he says, ما رأيت أحدا في كورة من الكور أعظم قدرا ولا أجل عند أهلها من أبي مسهر بدمشق. He says, and Imam Abu Hatim also, as we'll discuss in his biography inshallah, that he has an extremely vast journey and travels that he undertook in collecting and compiling and preserving the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said that the vast regions and lands and cities and countries that I entered and traveled to, and the scholars I met, I never entered any country and locality whose scholar was more beloved and held in high regard near them than Abu Mushir near the people of Sham, near the people of Sham, of Dimashq, of Damascus, the capital of present-day Syria. He says what he saw. He's narrating what he saw in this travels of his. He says, كنت أرى أبا مسهر إذا خرج إلى المسجد اصطفى الناس له يمنى ويسرى يسلمون عليه. He said that I saw that if Abu Mushir, he would leave his house to go to the masjid for the prayers, the people would line up waiting for him to walk, to go from his house to the masjid on the right and the left, so that they could just shake his hand. So that they could just shake his hand and give salam to him. To give salam to him, showing the great status and high regard this great Imam Abu Mushir was held in his city and locality in the area of Sham near its people. Then we'll move on to some aspects of the life of this great Imam and some of the incidents that occurred with him, and we'll focus on just one incident that shows the great struggle that this Imam went through and the great trial and tribulation he had to be patient upon, and the great service he presented to the Muslims in this trial and tribulation. And this was a great trial and tribulation that afflicted the Muslim nation and the great scholars of the Salaf and the Ahl-Hadith and the Ahl-Sunnah at that time. And this was the trial and tribulation of the Mu'tazila. The trial and tribulation of the Mu'tazila, and especially during the time of the 7th Caliph from the Caliphs of the Abbasid dynasty, al-Mamun. Ali ibn Uthman al-Nufayli, he says, كنا على باب أبي مسهر جماعة من أصحاب الحديث فمرض فعدناه وقلنا كيف أصبحت؟ قال في عافية راضيا عن الله ساخطا على ذي القرنين كيف لم يجعل سدا بيننا وبين أهل العراق كما جعله بين أهل خراسان وبين ياجوج وماجوج. Ali ibn Uthman al-Nufayli, he says that we, the students of Hadith, we reached the entrance of the residence of Imam Abu Mushir to visit him after he had gotten sick. So we came to his door, to his residence to visit him. So when we entered upon him, we said, كيف أصبحت? How are you feeling now? So he said, Alhamdulillah, I'm feeling better. I am pleased with Allah Azza wa Jal, and I am upset with Dhul Qarnayn. How did he not make between us and the people of Iraq a dam? Just like he made a dam between the Yajuj and Majuj and the people of Khurasan, showing the great trials and tribulations that were afflicting the Muslims from the region of Iraq in those times. The seat of the Abbasid dynasty, as we'll mention, that officially accepted the belief of the Mu'tazila. So he said, I'm upset with him that he did not make a dam, a barrier between us and the region of Iraq and the people of Iraq who have caused a great trial and tribulation for us, as he made a dam and a barrier between Yajuj and Majuj and the people of Khurasan. And this is one of the statements of the scholars as a side benefit regarding the region where this dam or barrier lies and where Yajuj and Majuj have been sealed behind this dam and barrier. Some of the scholars have mentioned that this is the region of Khurasan, which is today in Central Asia. Then he says, فما كان بعد هذا إلا يسيرا حتى وافى المامون دمشق ونزل بدير مران وبنى القبة فوق الجبل فكان بالليل يأمر بجمر عظيم فيوقد ويجعل في طسوط كبار تضلع من عند القبيبة بسلاسل وحبال فتضي له الغوطة فيبصرها بالليل. That a little after Imam Abu Mushir said this statement regarding the people of Iraq and the trials and tribulations that have afflicted them from Iraq, a few days passed by until Ma'mun, the caliph of the Muslims at that time, he came to Damascus, the capital of Syria. He visited Damascus from Iraq, from Baghdad, where the seat of the Abbasid dynasty lied. And he took up residence in a small town called Deir Murran. Deir Murran. And it is still known by this day today, and it is a small town at the foundation of the great mountain Qasiyun, which is a great mountain that overlooks the city of Damascus. So Al-Mamun, he took up residence in this town at the bottom of the mountain, at the foot of the mountain, and he built a big dome on top of the mountain, Qasiyun. And at night, he would burn, or he would order with the burning of a large amount of coal in that dome on top of the mountain. Large amount of coal on top of the mountain. And this coal was placed in big vessels, large vessels, and they would be moved and shaken by chains and ropes until they would light up into fire. And it would light up the area of al-Ghuta, which is a well-known area, which is a suburban or a countryside area of Damascus that surrounds the city of Damascus. Until today, it is known by the same name, al-Ghuta. It's a countryside, suburban area that surrounds the city of area. So he would do this every night so that this area would light up with the burning coal that occurred at the top of the mountain Qasiyun, because they did not have electricity at that time. This was one of the ways that they would light up a place. فَيُبْصِرُهَا بِاللَّيْلِ, so that he could see al-Ghuta at night. So that he could see the area of al-Ghuta at night. وَكَانَ لِأَبِي مُسْهِرْ حَلَقَ فِي الْجَامِعِ بَيْنَ الْعِشَاءَيْنِ in the حائط الشرقي فبينه وليلة إذ قد دخل الجامع ضوء عظيم فقال أبو مسهر ما هذا؟ قالوا النار التي تضلع من الجبل لأمير المؤمنين. That when this was occurring every night, one night Imam Abu Mushir was in his gathering in al-Jami'. And al-Jami', when it is mentioned regarding Damascus in Syria, then it only means one Jami', which is al-Jami' al-Umawi. Al-Jami' al-Umawi, the grand mosque that the Umayyad dynasty built. So he had a gathering of knowledge, gathering of hadith between the two Ishas, between Maghrib and Isha in al-Jami' al-Umawi, near the eastern side or the eastern pillar of this great mosque. So he was teaching the students of hadith one night. Suddenly, where an extremely bright light entered the mosque. Extremely bright light that blinded them entered the mosque. So Imam Abu Mushir, he said, what is this? What is happening? So the students informed him that this is the fire from top of the mountain Qasiyun that is being burned for Amirul Mu'mineen, for the leader of the Muslims, Al-Mamun. So that he could see Al-Ghuta, so that he could see the area of Al-Ghuta, hatta tudī lahu Al-Ghuta. Faqala, so upon hearing this, Imam Abu Mushir recited this ayah, recited this statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, أَتَبْنُونَ بِكُلِّ رِيعٍ آيَةً تَعْبَثُونَ وَتَتَّخِذُونَ مَصَانِعَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَخْلُدُونَ. He recited this ayah that why do you build a landmark? Why do you build a landmark on every high place in vain, and construct castles in every high place? Construct castles in every high place as if you are going to live forever. As if you are going to live forever. وَكَانَ فِي الْحَلْقَةِ صَاحِبْ خَبَرْ لِلْمَامُونَ فَرَفَعَ ذَلِكَ لِلْمَامُونَ. when Imam Abu Mushir recited this ayah, there was a spy of Ma'mun in that gathering. So he informed Ma'mun with what Imam Abu Mushir has said. فَحَقَدَهَا عَلَيْهِ فَلَمَّا رَحَلَ الْمَأْمُونَ أَمَرَ بِحَمْلِ أَبِي مُسْهِرِ إِلَيْهِ فَامْتَحَنَهُ بِالرَّقَّةِ فِي الْقُرْآنِ. So when this spy informed Ma'mun with what Imam Abu Mushir has said, he started from that same day to dislike him and be displeased with him, despise him and dislike him. When Ma'mun, he left back, or he traveled from Damascus, he ordered that Imam Abu Mushir be brought to him in the city of ar-Raqqa, in the city of Raqqa, which is also a city in Syria, and there he tested him with the Quran. There he tested him. Imam Abu Mushir was tested by Ma'mun with the Quran. And what is this test that occurred? This is the test that Ma'mun tested the great scholars of the Salaf and of the Ahl-Hadith, Ahl-Sunnah of that time, with the belief of the Mu'tazila that the Quran is makhluq, that the Quran is created, that the Quran is created. The belief of Ahl-Sunnah, Ahl-Hadith, as we just mentioned, is that the Quran is the speech of Allah, kalamullah, ghayru makhluq. It is not created. It is a speech of the Creator. It is an attribute of Allah Azza wa Jal. It is not created. And whoever believes any attribute of Allah Azza wa Jal, the Creator, is created, then he is a disbeliever. He is a disbeliever by the consensus of the Muslims. By the consensus of the Muslims. Whoever believes that the Quran is makhluk, that it is created, then he has declared that the Quran is not the speech of Allah. Then it is not the speech of the Creator, and by way of this he has disbelieved according to the consensus of the Muslims. And the Salaf, the Imams of the Salaf are all united in this belief, And before we go on, we would like to just present a historical overview of this misguided sect of the Mu'tazila. This misguided, deviant sect of the Mu'tazila, they came into existence at the end of the Umayyad dynasty. At the end of the Umayyad dynasty, in the beginning of the 2nd century after the Hijrah. In the beginning of the 2nd century, in the hundreds after the Hijrah, in the city of Basra. In the city of Basra. And the one to whom the founding of this misguided sect and deviant group is attributed to is Wasil ibn Ata. Wasil ibn Ata, who lived in the city of Basra. He at first was a student of Hadith, attending the gatherings of the foremost scholar of Basra at that time from the Tabi'een, Imam al-Hasan al-Basri, who is known as Sayyidul Tabi'een, the leader of the Tabi'een. But Allah Ta'ala willed that he be misguided, he followed his desires, and he started to negate the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal. And the foremost of them, the speech of Allah Azza wa Jal. To the point that he distanced himself from the gatherings of Imam al-Hasan al-Basri. Imam al-Hasan al-Basri. So Imam al-Hasan al-Basri, upon seeing this, he said, "I'tazalana Wasil." That Wasil has shunned us and he has left us. So this sect and this belief became to be known as the Mu'tazila. This is the reason for this name. Those who have shunned and left and distanced themselves. This is the reason for this, the name of this sect. And this sect started to spread in Basra and in the area of Iraq. Wasil ibn Ata had his companions and his students who would take this responsibility of spreading this misguided beliefs of this sect. And a lot of these innovators and the leaders of this sect were, alhamdulillah, they were killed by the rulers of the Muslims of that time to save the Muslims from the great evil and their misguided belief, such as al-Jarh ibn Dirham. Al-Jarh ibn Dirham, who was from the foremost of the innovators of this sect, he was killed at the end of the Umayyad dynasty. Then his student, Al-Jahm ibn Safwan, who also created a subsect from the Mu'tazila, which is known as Jahmiyyah, he was also, alhamdulillah, caught and punished and killed by the Muslim rulership at that time to protect the Muslims from this deviated, misguided belief. And others from them were also caught and killed. The remaining, they worked under darkness and in shadows amongst the laymen and the ignorant, spreading this belief and this misguidance until Ma'mun came into power. Until Ma'mun, the 7th caliphate of the Abbasid dynasty, he came into power in the year 198. 198 after the Hijrah. And Ma'mun, this is his nickname. These rulers, they had nicknames. His name is Abdullah ibn Harun. He is the son of Harun al-Rashid. He is the son of Harun al-Rashid, Abdullah ibn Harun. And he is well known by his nickname, Al-Ma'mun. When he came into power in the year 198, he became the ruler of the Muslims. He was someone who loved intellectual sciences. And he loved the speech of the philosophers of previous times. He was someone who loved the speech of the philosophers of previous times, and he established a complete research house for translating the books of Greek philosophy into the Arabic language. He established a complete research house for translating the books of Greek philosophy into the Arabic language that he named Baytul Hikmah, the place of hikmah and wisdom, the house of hikmah. And these innovators from the Mu'tazila, they started to gain power in his time. They started to gain power, and they started to come out from their holes and hiding and their darkness and shadows, to the point that they surrounded Ma'mun with their beliefs, and he became one of the foremost people who accepted this belief of the Mu'tazila. From the people, from these scholars of misguidance and deviation and innovation who afflicted Ma'mun was Bishr al-Marisi. Bishr al-Marisi, one of the foremost figureheads of the Mu'tazila of that time. He played a major role in causing Ma'mun to accept the belief of the Mu'tazila and causing a test and trial for the scholars of the Salaf in that time. And from an amazing historical aspect that we can mention is that this person, Bishr al-Marisi, he lived his entire life hiding from Harun al-Rashid, from the father of Ma'mun. When Harun al-Rashid was the leader of the Muslims, he spent his entire life hiding from Harun al-Rashid, because Harun al-Rashid had ruled for him to be caught and to be killed, to protect the Muslims from his deviation and misguidance. Protect the Muslims from misguidance and deviation. He spent 40 years of his life hiding from the rulership of the Abbasid dynasty until Ma'mun came into power, and he became the closest of the people to Ma'mun, to the exact son of the person who spent his whole life trying to catch him and to kill him. So this also, in this is a benefit, that a ruler, a person might come who might aid the Sunnah. Then someone from his own blood, his own son might come who might be a test and trial for the people of the Sunnah and the people of the truth. And then his son or someone close to him might come who might again aid the Sunnah, as we'll see soon. That's Harun al-Rashid. He spent his life fighting and trying to catch this Mu'tazila. His son Ma'mun came, who became one of the figureheads of this misguided sect and tested the people. Then his nephew came, who finished off the Mu'tazila and aided the Sunnah. And this is a great lesson for all of us as to how situations can change, and Allah Ta'ala raises a people and lowers them by way of them aiding the truth and the Quran and the Sunnah and opposing it. From the misguided beliefs of this deviant sect, the Mu'tazila, as we mentioned, the foremost is to negate the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal. to negate the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal, and from the foremost of these attributes that they negated is the attribute of kalam, speech. And they said that the Quran, it is not the speech of Allah, rather it is created, rather it is makhluk and created. From the misguided beliefs of the Mu'tazila is refuting and negating qadr that we just mentioned. Negating qadr. They are just like the Qadariya, in which they negate and they do not believe in pre-decree and in qadr. From the misguided deviant beliefs of the Mu'tazila is that the major sinner, the one who commits a major sin, then in the hereafter he is a dweller of the hellfire. He is a dweller of the hellfire forever, just like the Khawarij. But in the worldly life, he is not a believer nor a disbeliever. He is not a disbeliever or a believer, rather he is fi manzila baina al-manzilatayn. He is in a level between a believer and a disbeliever, whatever level that is. So these are some of the major aspects of misguidance and deviation of this deviant sect, the Mu'tazila. Ma'mun at first, he would not force the people upon this belief. Even though he had accepted it, he did not become extreme in it, forcing the people until the year 218. Until the year 218 after the Hijrah, where he started to use his power and his command and his rulership over the people to test the people. And the foremost of the people who were tested were the scholars of Ahlul-Hadith, Ahlul-Sunnah, the great scholars of the Salaf of that time. No scholar lived in those times, especially in the region of Iraq, except that he was tested. Imam Ali ibn al-Madini was tested. Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in was tested. And the foremost of them was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, as we mentioned in his biography, the great test that he endured and the strength he showed in staying steadfast in these tests. And this test continued, and this misguidance of the Mu'tazila continued for 3 successive rulers from the Abbasid dynasty. Al-Ma'mun, then his brother who came into power, Al-Mu'tasim Billah, who was Muhammad ibn Harun al-Rashid. Al-Ma'mun, we mentioned, is Abdullah ibn Harun al-Rashid. After he died, his brother came into power, Muhammad ibn Harun al-Rashid, who is well known as Mu'tasim Billah. He also followed upon this misguidance of the Mu'tazila. Then came his son, Al-Wathiq Billah. Al-Wathiq Billah, whose name is Harun ibn Muhammad al-Mu'tasim. Harun ibn Muhammad ibn Harun al-Rashid. He also followed in this misguidance and testing the people until his brother, Al-Mutawakkil ala Allah. Al-Mutawakkil ala Allah, whose name is Ja'far ibn Muhammad ibn Harun. Ja'far ibn Muhammad ibn Harun, meaning the nephew of Al-Ma'mun. The nephew of Ma'mun, the son of his brother Muhammad. The son of his brother Muhammad, Ja'far ibn Muhammad ibn Harun. He came to power in the year 232 after the Hijrah. And alhamdulillah, he aided the Sunnah. He aided the Sunnah, and he caught and severely punished the Mu'tazila. Aided the Sunnah and freed them from the jails and the prisons and the tests and the trials and tribulations they were going through, and severely caught and punished the Mu'tazila. Continuing with this test of Imam Abu Mushir, Asbagh, he says, أن أبا مسهر دخل على المامون بالرقة وقد ضرب رقب رجل وهو مطروح فأوقب أبا مسهر في الحال فامتحنه. That, continuing the story, that Ma'mun, after hearing what he heard in Damascus, he ordered that Abu Mushir be brought to him in the city of Raqqa in Syria, where he tested him with the Quran, with this issue of the Mu'tazila that the Quran is created. So Asbagh, he says that Abu Mushir, he entered upon Ma'mun in the city of Raqqa in Syria, and when he entered, he saw that Ma'mun had just killed a person in front of him who had refused to believe and claim that the Quran is created. He had just killed him in front of him. So when Imam Abu Mushir entered, he immediately stopped him and asked him and tested him. Asked him about the Quran. فَلَمْ يُجِبْهُ. So he did not answer him. Imam Abu Mushir did not answer him. فَأَمَرَ بِهِ فَوُضِيَ فِي النِّطْعِ لِيَضْرِبَ عُنُقَهُ فَأَجَابَ إِلَى خَلْقِ الْقُرْآنِ. That when he did not answer him, Ma'mun ordered that the nitr is a sheet of leather that used to be placed under the person who was supposed to be killed. Under the person who was supposed to be killed, who had been ruled upon to be killed. So Ma'mun ordered that this be laid down so that Imam Abu Mushir could be also punished and killed. فَأَجَابَ إِلَى خَلْقِ الْقُرْآنِ. Upon seeing this, he was forced to answer him regarding this issue and say that the Quran is created. Say that the Quran is created. فَأُخْرِجَ مِنَ النِّطْعِ. So he was exited from this sheet of leather upon which he was placed to be killed. فَرَجَعَ عَنْ قَوْلِي. As soon as they raised him and they removed him, he took back his statement saying the Quran is the speech of Allah, it is not created. فَأُعِيدَ إِلَى النِّطْعِ فَأَجَابَ. So he was laid down on the sheet of leather to be killed. So again he said the Quran is created. He was forced to say that the Quran is created. فَأَمَرَ بِهِ أَنْ يُوَجَّهِ إِلَى الْعِرَاقِ وَلَمْ يَسِقْ بِقَوْلِهِ فَمَا حَذِرَ وَأَقَامَ عند إسحاق بن إبراهيم يعني نائب بغداد أيام لا تبلغ 100 يوم ومات. So Ma'mun, upon seeing this, he did not accept his statement that the Quran is created, realizing that Imam Abu Mushir is only saying this out of fear and out of force. So he ordered that he be banished to Iraq, to the jails, the dungeons of the Abbasid dynasty in Baghdad, in Iraq, where the head of his police in Iraq, Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, he tortured him in these cells and jails for a period of 100 years until this great Imam Abu Mushir passed away. And this is great Imam Abu Mushir, he passed away under this great trial and tribulation. Imam Ibn Sa'ad, he says, كان أبو مسهر أشخص من دمشق إلى المأمون بالرقة فسألوا عن القرآن فقال هو كلام الله وأبى أن يقول مخلوق فدعا له بالنطع والسيف ليضرب عنقه فلما رأى ذلك قال مخلوق فتركه من القتل وقال أما إنك لو قلت ذلك قبل السيف لقبلت منك ولكنك تخرج الآن فتقول قلت ذاك فرقا من القتل. فأمر بحسبه ببغداد في ربيع الآخر سنة 18 ومات بعد قليل في الحبس في غرة رجب من السنة فشهده قوم كثير من أهل بغداد. Imam Ibn Sa'ad rahimahullah, he says that when Imam Abu Mushir was brought from Damascus to the city of Raqqa to be presented in front of Ma'mun, he asked him regarding the Quran. So Imam Abu Mushir, he said it is Kalamullah, the speech of Allah, and he refused to say that it is makhluk, it is created. So Al-Ma'mun ordered that the sword and this leather sheet be brought so that Imam Abu Mushir could be killed in punishment. So when Imam Abu Mushir saw this, he said makhluk, he said it is created, out of being forced to say so. So Ma'mun saved him from being killed. Ma'mun saved him from being killed, but he said that you have only said this out of fear of the sword, out of fear of the sword. Had you said it from the first instance, before we brought the sword and this leather sheet, I would have accepted it from you. But you say it now, after you see the sword, then you have only said it to free your life, to save your life. So he did not accept this from him, and he ordered that Imam Abu Mushir be taken as a prisoner to the city of Baghdad, the capital, the seat of the Abbasid dynasty, in the month of Rabiul Akhir. In the month of Rabiul Akhir, in the year 218 after the Hijrah, and he passed away while in the dungeons of the Abbasid dynasty, the first day of Rajab, meaning almost 100 years he spent in these jails in the first day of Rajab in the year 218. فَشَهِدَهُ قَوْمٌ كَثِيرٌ مِنْ أَهْلِ بَغْدَادٍ. So after he passed away, a large number of people gathered for his janazah from the people of Baghdad. From the people of Baghdad. Showing that no matter how much oppression and trial and tribulation might be placed upon the scholars of the Sunnah and the scholars of the Salaf and the Ahl-Hadith, that the people will always love them, respect them, revere them, hold them in high regard. And this is one of the distinguishing aspects of the Ahl-Hadith and Ahl-Sunnah, the janaiz, the prayer of the janazah, that people, irrespective of their beliefs and their madhahib and the trials and tribulations that are going on, they gather in vast, large numbers for the imams of the Ahlul Hadith and the Ahlul Sunnah. Imam Ishaq ibn Rahuya, he says, لما سار المأمون إلى دمشق ذكروا له أبا مسهر ووصفوه بالعلم والفقه فأحضره فقال ما تقول في القرآن؟ قال كما قال تعالى وإن أحد من المشركين استجارك فأجره حتى يسمع كلام الله. Imam Ishaq ibn Rahuya says that when Ma'mun came to Damascus, the people, he heard from the people the great praise from Imam Abu Mushir, the great praise for this Imam of Damascus of Sham, where they were praising him for his knowledge and his fiqh and his understanding in the religion and knowledge of jurisprudence. So he asked that he be brought to him. So when Imam Abu Mushir was brought to Ma'mun, he asked him, what do you say regarding the Quran? What do you say regarding the Quran? So he said, I say just as has come in the Quran, and he recited this ayah as a proof that Allah Ta'ala has ordered the Muslims that if anyone from the mushriks, from the disbelievers, if they were to seek your protection, then give him protection so that hatta yasma kalam Allah, so that he can hear the speech of Allah, the Quran. He can hear in your houses the speech of Allah. That might lead him to be guided to accept Islam. That might lead him to be guided to accept Islam. So he used this as an ayah for the proof of the belief that the Quran is the kalamullah, the speech of Allah. فَقَالَ Ma'mun did not accept this from him. So he said to Imam Abu Mushir, أَمَخْلُوقٌ هُوَ أَوْ غَيْرُ مَخْلُوقٌ. He asked him directly, is it created or is it not created? So Imam Abu Mushir responded to this ruler of all of the Muslims at that time, ruled vast areas of lands from the east to the west without fear. He said, قَالَ وَمَا يَقُولَ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ قَالَ مَخْلُوق. So he asked him, and what does the ruler of the Muslims, Amirul Mu'mineen, say regarding this matter? He said, مخلوق, that it is created. قَالَ Imam Abu Musa then asked him, يُخْبِرْ عَنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم أو عن الصحابة والتابعين. That when he said that I believe it is makhluk, it is created, he said, are you basing this belief on something narrated from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, a hadith or a athar? قَالَ بِالنَّظَرِ وَاحْتَجَّ عَلَيْهِ. So he said, no, this is my personal analogy and personal belief. This is something I was guided to with my personal intellect. And then he started providing his intellectual proofs. Imam Abu Musa immediately stopped him. He said, فَقَالَ يَا أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نَحْنُ مَعَ الْجَمْهُورَ الْعَظَمِ أَقُولُ بِقَوْلِهِمْ وَالْقُرْآنُ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ غَيْرُ مَخْلُوقٍ. Abu Musa rahimahullah, he says, O Amirul Mu'mineen, believer, O leader of the Muslims, I am with the consensus of the scholars of Islam. I say what they say, that the Quran is the speech of Allah. It is not created. It is not created. So upon hearing this, Ma'mun said, أُخْرُجْ قَبَّحَكَ اللَّهِ وَقَبَّحَ مَنْ قَلَّدَكَ دِينَهُ وَجَعَلَكَ قُدْوَةً. Ma'mun, upon seeing this, he said, get out. May Allah curse you and deform you, and may Allah curse the one who follows your path and takes you as an example in this belief. Takes you as an example in this belief. Musa ibn al-Hasan, rahimahullah, he says, سمعت أبا مسهر وقد وجه به المأمون إلى إسحاق بن إبراهيم ببغداد فأحضر له إسحاق جماعة ليقر بكتاب المحنة الذي كتبه المأمون في خلق القرآن ونفي الرؤيا وعذاب القبر وأن الميزان ليس بكفتين. That when Imam Abu Mushir was sent to the head of the police of the Abbasids in Baghdad, in the dungeons of the Abbasids in Baghdad, in Iraq, Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, the head of the police, he brought to Imam Abu Mushir people, evil scholars who had followed desires and worldly benefits and sought positions with the Mu'tazila and this oppressive and answered them in this test and trials. He said they brought these people to Imam Abu Mushir so that they could get him to agree to what was in the book Al-Mihna that Ma'mun had authored. Ma'mun had also authored a book that he called Kitab al-Mihna, a book in which he used to test the scholars of the Salaf, in which he had mentioned matters of belief regarding which they are supposed to be tested. Regarding which they are supposed to be tested. What was in this book? It says in this book was the belief that the Quran is created, and that nafi ar-ru'ya, that Allah Ta'ala will not be seen in the hereafter. Allah Ta'ala will not be seen in the hereafter. Wa nafi azab al-qabr, that there is no punishment of the grave. Wa anna al-mizan laysa bikaffatain, that the scale on which a person and his deeds will be measured on the day of judgment, then it does not exist. It does not have two scales. It does not have two scales. And all of this are from the foremost misguidance and deviance of the Mu'tazila, who refuted and rejected the attributes of Allah and the ahadith that have come in matters of creed and belief, especially the ahadith, especially the ahadith that are not mutawatir. فَلَمَّا قُرِيَ الْكِتَابَ عَلَى أَبِي مُسْهِرٍ قال أنا منكر لجميع ما في كتابكم هذا. When this book was read upon Imam Abu Mushir so that he could agree with what was in this book of deviance and misguidance, Imam Abu Mushir, without fear, he said, I reject everything that is in this book. I reject everything that you have just recited upon me from this book. أبعد مجالسة مالك والثوري ومشايخ أهل العلم إذن لا أكفر بالله. That after sitting with the Imams of that times from the Salaf, such as Imam Malik and Imam Sufyan al-Thawri and the great scholars of the Salaf, after that will I disbelieve in Allah Azza wa Jal? Will I choose deviance and misguidance? لا أقول القرآن مخلوق ولا أنكر عذاب القبر ولا الموازين أنها كفتان ولا أن الله يرى في القيامة. He says, I will not disbelieve in Allah. I will not say that the Quran is created. I will not reject the punishment of the grave. I will not reject the mizan upon which the person and his deeds will be measured on the day of judgment, that it has two scales. I will not reject that Allah will be seen on the day of judgment. Then he added, he did not just reject what was in the book and what has been recited to him, he added more aspects of the belief of the Salaf that he learned from the great Imams such as Imam Malik and Sufyan al-Thawri and others. He says, وَلَا أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى عَرْشِهِ وعلمه قد أحاط بكل شيء نزل بذلك القرآن وجاءت به الأخبار التي نقلها أهل العلم. He says, and I will not deny that Allah Ta'ala is upon His arsh, upon His throne above the seven heavens, and His knowledge is with us. His knowledge has surrounded us. His knowledge is with us, and these aspects of belief have come in the Quran and the authentic ahadith. Have come in the Quran, in the authentic ahadith that have been narrated by the utmost precise, trustworthy narrators of hadith. Utmost precise narrators of hadith. فَجُرَّ بِرِجْلِهِ وَطُرِحَ فِي أَضْيَقَ الْمَجَالِسِ. Upon hearing this, Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, the head of the police of the Abbasid dynasty, he ordered that Imam Abu Mushir be grabbed by his legs and be dragged, and he was thrown in the most tight of the jail cells, in the most smallest and the tightest of the dungeons of the jail cells. فَمَا أَقَامَ بِهِ إِلَّا يَسِيرًا حَتَّى تُوفِيَ رَحِمَهُ اللَّهِ. And he could not bear that punishment except for a few days, as we mentioned, almost 100 days, until he passed away under this oppression and punishment. May Allah have mercy on him, rahimahullah. فَحَدَرَ جَنَازَتَهُ مِنَ الْخَلْقِ مَا لَا يُحْصِيهِ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. That after this, his janazah, his prayer for his janazah that occurred, such a large number of people attended his janazah that one could not have enumerated them. One could not have even enumerated them. Imam Abu Dawud al-Sijistani, rahimahullah, the author of the great book As-Sunan, he says, كان من ثقات الناس رحم الله أبا مسهر لقد كان من الإسلام بمكان حمل على المحنة فأبى وحمل على السيف فمد رأسه وجرد السيف فأبى فلما رأوا ذلك منه حمل إلى السجن فمات. Imam Abu Dawud, he says, he was from the people who had the utmost trust in Allah Azza wa Jal. May Allah have mercy upon the great Imam Abu Mushir. He was from the foremost scholars of Islam. He was forced and he was trialed and tested, so he was patient. And he was placed upon the sword, so he extended his neck to be a sacrifice upon the correct belief. And the sword was unsheathed in front of him, and he was still patient. And when they saw this from him, his unwavering belief and his strength in his creed, then they entered him into the jail cells and the dungeons until he passed away, rahimahullah. Then we'll move on to his creed, i'tiqad and aqidah, and his warning from the people of innovation and misguidance. And we'll just suffice with this aspect of his creed, for which he was extremely tested and tried, and that was the cause of his death. Imam Abu Mushir, rahimahullah, he says, ما أدركنا أحدا من أهل العلم إلا وهو يقول القرآن كلام الله غير مخلوق. He says that I did not meet any from my scholars, from the great scholars of the Salaf and the Ahlul-Hadith, Ahlul-Sunnah, from the great scholars of the Atba'ut-Tabi'een and other than them, they were all unified and united in this statement that the Quran is the Kalamullah, the speech of Allah. It is not created. It is not created. Then we'll move on to his ittiba', his methodology in jurisprudence, and him following unconditionally the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Ibn Mufarrij, he says, wa Abu Mushir sayyidu ahli al-Sham wa faqihihim wa abidihim. That Imam Abu Mushir, he is from the leaders of the area of Sham, the Muslims of Sham, and he is from the foremost of their jurists, of their fuqaha. He is a faqih, the foremost of the jurists of Sham, and he is from the foremost of the worshippers of Allah in the region of Sham. Imam Abu Mushir, rahimahullah, he says, جالست سعيد بن عبد العزيز 12 سنة وما كان أحد من أصحابي أحفظ لحديثه مني. And we mentioned that this great Imam, his mention will come soon when we mention that from the teachers and shuyukh of Imam Abu Mushir is Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi. Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi. He says regarding this teacher and scholar that he says, Imam Abu Mushir, that I spent 12 long years in the company of my sheikh and teacher Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi. Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi, learning hadith from him, learning fiqh and jurisprudence from him. Learning hadith and fiqh and jurisprudence from this great Imam from the Ahl-Hadith. And he said that no one from my companions, from the students of Imam Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi had memorized more from him, than me, had benefited and memorized more from him than me. And who is Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi? Who is Sa'id? And it might be a name that many of our listeners and people who are present have not heard. Imam Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi, he is a Dimashqi from the city of Damascus, the capital of Syria, from the same city of Imam Abu Mushir. And he was from the major Atba'ut-Tabi'een. He was from the major Imams of the Muslims. He is a thiqa, the foremost memorizer and reliable, trustworthy narrator of hadith, and he is the mufti of Dimashq wa alimuha. The mufti of the city of Damascus, and his scholar, faqih Ahl-Sham ba'd al-Awza'i. He is the foremost jurist of the region of Sham after the great Imam al-Awza'i. The great Imam al-Awza'i. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, he says, huwa wal-Awza'i indi sawa. That Imam Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi and Imam al-Awza'i near me are of the same level, or of the same level. This is a great praise from Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, from the foremost muhaddithin and the fuqaha of this Islamic nation, regarding these two great muhaddithin and fuqaha, Imam Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi and Imam al-Awza'i. Imam al-Hakim, he says, هو لأهل الشام كمالك لأهل المدينة في التقدم والفقه والفضل. That Imam Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi, he is in the region of Sham, similar to Imam Malik in the region of Medina. Similar to Imam Malik in the region of Medina in relation to the level they reached in their knowledge and in the knowledge of fiqh, in the knowledge of the jurisprudence of Islam, and in their virtue and nobility, in their virtue of nobility. Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi, he said, وَثَبَتَ الْفَتْوَى بِالشَّامِ عَلَى مَذْهَبَ الْأَوْزَاعِي وَسَعِيد بن عبد العزيز. وَسَعِيد bin Abdul Aziz. That the people of Sham in those times, then they used to follow and benefit regarding the Sunnah and the Hadith of Prophet Muhammad from the statements and the positions and the fatwa and the madhab of Imam al-Awza'i and Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi. Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi. We mentioned this showing again that these were great jurists of Islam that preceded the four Imams that the people have blindly followed and restricted and confined themselves to, deeming that these are the only four schools of thought in Islam, and they are the only four jurists of Islam, and even anyone who exists from them and their schools of thought, then he has deviated and misguided. These are Imams that preceded them. Imam Ahmad, we just mentioned, whose madhab is blindly followed by the Hanbalis. They confine and restrict themselves to the books of this madhab, and he himself is saying that from the great scholars of Islam is Imam al-Awza'i and Imam Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi, praising them for their knowledge in hadith and their knowledge in fiqh and jurisprudence. So Imam Abu Mushir, who was from the foremost students of this great Imam Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi, who stayed with him for 12 years learning from him, he reached the pinnacle in the science of hadith and in the science of fiqh and jurisprudence. He was upon the methodology of Imam Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz, who was upon the methodology of Imam al-Awza'i, following the methodology of Ahlul-Hadith and jurisprudence. Following the methodology of the Ahlul-Hadith and jurisprudence. Imam Abu Mushir, rahimahullah, he says, قال لي سعيد بن عبد العزيز ما رأيت أحسن مسألة منك بعد سليمان بن موسى. That Imam Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi praised his student, Imam Abu Mushir, for the level he has reached in fiqh, in jurisprudence, by saying that I have not met any person who was better in researching matters of fiqh, researching rulings pertaining to acts of worship than you, O Abu Mushir, after Sulaiman ibn Musa, after the great Imam Sulaiman ibn Musa al-Dimashqi al-Ashdaq. Sulaiman ibn Musa al-Dimashqi al-Ashdaq, who was the great jurist and the mufti of Damascus in his time. He is from the junior tabi'een, from the junior tabi'een. So this was the methodology of Imam Abu Mushir in jurisprudence, in which he is upon the methodology of his teacher, Sa'id bin Abdul Aziz al-Tanuhi, who is upon the methodology of his teacher and companion, Imam al-Awza'i. They are all upon the methodology of the Ahlul Hadith. Then we'll move on to some of the statements of this great Imam, Imam Abu Mushir. From the statements is that قيل لأبي مسهر في الرجل يصحف ويخطئ ويهم في الحديث فقال بين أمره فقيل له أذلك عيب قال لا. That it was asked to Imam Abu Mushir regarding a narrator of hadith, a person who makes mistakes in his narration of hadith. He makes mistakes and errors, and he distorts the words, changes the words. Is it permissible for a person to make clear his affair and to disparage him and to criticize this narrator, to tell the people that he is a weak narrator and his hadith is to be rejected? So Imam Abu Mushir, rahimahullah, he says, Bayyin amrahu, then clarify his affair to the people. Let the people know that he makes errors and mistakes in narration of hadith, and that his hadith is not to be accepted. فَقِيلَ لَهُ أَذَلِكَ عَيْبٌ. So it was asked, is that not something that is considered backbiting? Is it not considered backbiting? فَقَالَ لَا. That no. this is from advice to the Muslims. We have mentioned in our previous classes that the science of Jarh wat-Tadeel, of criticizing and praising narrators, it is from the greatest of sciences by which the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad has been saved and preserved until our times and remain until the end of times. And the scholars have unanimously agreed that criticizing and praising the narrators of hadith, then this is not backbiting. This is not backbiting, rather this is from the obligatory matters in giving advice to the Muslims and saving the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad from distortions and errors and mistakes. Imam Ibn Hibban rahimahullah, he says, وَكَانَ إِمَامَ أَهْلِ الشَّامِ فِي الْحِفْظِ وَالْإِتْقَانِ مِمَّا عَنَى بِأَنْسَابِ أَهْلِ بَلَدِهِ وَأَنْبَائِهِمْ وَإِلَيْهِ كَانَ يَرْجِعُ أَهْلُ الشَّامِ فِي الْجَرْحِ وَالتَّعْدِيلِ لِشُيُوخِهِمْ. Imam Ibn Hibban, he says regarding Imam Ibn Abu Mushir, that he was the Imam of the region of Sham in precise, accurate memorization of the hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he gave due diligence and reached high levels in knowing the biographies of the narrators of hadith of his region, in compiling and memorizing and preserving the biographies of the narrators of hadith. And to him used to return the people of Sham, the scholars of Sham, to know the praise and criticism of the narrators of hadith in Sham. The people, the scholars of Sham used to refer back to him, consider him a reference point to rule upon the narrators of Sham, praising and criticizing them, whose hadith is to be accepted and whose hadith is to be rejected. And Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, in this great book Taqdimatul-Marifah, he has mentioned a chapter in his biography that is Babu Ma Dhukira min Kalam Abu Mushir fi Naqilat al-Akhbar wa Kunahum wa Asma'ihim. Chapter in which he has narrated the statements of Imam Abu Mushir that shows his great status and the high level he reached in knowing the narrators of hadith, knowing details and detailed matters regarding the narrators of hadith, and criticizing them and praising them, and his knowledge about their names and their kunyas, and differentiating between two narrators, and everything that pertains to this knowledge of ilm al-rijal and Jarh wat-Tadeel. And he has mentioned several examples in this chapter that one can refer back to. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he says in this book Taqdimatul-Marifah, سألت أبي عن أبي مسهر فقال الثقة ما رأيت أفصح منه ممن كتبنا عنه. That he says, I asked my father, the great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, regarding Imam Abu Mushir. So he said he was thiqa, he was the utmost reliable, trustworthy narrator of the hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Then he mentions another aspect of his life and him reaching the highest level in another branch of knowledge and another science of Islam. He says, I did not see anyone who was more proficient in the Arabic language than him, from the scholars that we heard and wrote hadith from the vast scholars that Imam Abu Hatim heard and wrote and learned hadith from. He said, I did not see anyone who was more, who reached a higher level in the sciences of the Arabic language and proficiency in the Arabic language. And this is shown in the great prose and poems that are narrated on this great Imam Abu Mushir. On this great Imam Abu Mushir. Imam al-Dhuhli, Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he says, سمعت أبا مسهر ينشد ولا خير في الدنيا لمن لم يكن له من الله في دار المقام نصيب فإن تعجب الدنيا رجالا فإنه متاع قليل والزوال قريب. Imam al-Dhuhli, he says that I heard Imam Abu Mushir mentioning these two lines of poetry, that there is no goodness in this worldly life for the person who does not work towards the afterlife. There is no goodness in this worldly life for a person who has no share near Allah Azza wa Jal in paradise in the afterlife. Then he says that if this worldly life has deluded some people who are deficient in their intellect, and they have been deluded by this short worldly life, he says, for verily this worldly life, it is a brief enjoyment. it is a brief enjoyment, and it is something that will end soon. It is something that will end soon. Ibn Dayzil, he says, سمعت أبا مسهر ينشد حبك عمرت مثل ما عاش نوح ثم لاقيت كل ذاك يسارا هل من الموت لا أبالك بد أي حي إلى سوى الموت سارا. That Imam Abu Mushir mentioned these two lines of poetry. He said that imagine, let us imagine that you live for the time period that Nuh alayhi salam lived for. And how long did he live for? 950 years. 950 years. He's saying that let us imagine that you live for the same time period that Nuh alayhi salam lived, which is 950 years. But you will find that all of that was something of little value. It went by quickly. It went by quickly. هل من الموت لا أبالك بد. No matter how long you live, can you escape death? Can anyone escape and run away from death? Death is to come, there is no running away from it. أي حي إلى سوى الموت سارا. Whoever is alive, what is he going towards except death? Except that he is going towards his death and leaving this short, worldly, temporary life. Abdul Baqi ibn al-Hasan, he says, سأل أبا مسهر رجل عن مسألة فلم يجبه ثم عاد عليه فلم يجبه ثم عاد عليه فلم يجبه. That Abdul Baqi ibn al-Hasan, he says that one person, he asked Imam Abu Mushir regarding a matter. He asked him a question. So Imam Abu Mushir did not answer him. So that person repeated that question. So Imam Abu Mushir again did not answer him. He repeated that question a third time. So he again did not answer him. فقيل له في ذلك فقال سمعت مالكا يقول من إزالة العلم أن تجيب كل من سألك. So when it was told to him, you are from the Imams of the Muslims in our times in the area of Sham, why did you not answer this person regarding the matter he asked you, the question he posed to you? So he says, I heard my Shaykh and teacher Imam Malik saying that lowering knowledge and disrespecting knowledge is by answering everyone who asks you. Answering every question that you ask. Every question that a person is asked, then a person who answers every single question that he is asked, then this is from diminishing and disrespecting knowledge. Diminishing and disrespecting knowledge. A person might ask questions that might not be at the level of the questioner. If he answers those questions, it might cause a trial and tribulation for the questioner. He might not understand them properly. He might not take the answer properly. So it is not proper that a person of knowledge answers every single question that he is possessed. Some of the questions are questions regarding matters that have not occurred, that are far from reality, that might never occur. Questions regarding intricate, detailed parts of some matters that are of less or no benefit. So such questions are to be shunned. And a person who delves into these questions and answers every question regarding them, then he is in reality decreasing and diminishing and disrespecting the knowledge that he has been given. Then we'll finish with the death of this great Imam Abu Mushir rahimahullah. Abu Hassan al-Ziyadi, he said, مات أبو مسهر في رجب سنة 18 that Imam Abu Mushir, he passed away in the month of Rajab in the year 218. And Imam Ibn Sa'd rahimahullah, he says مات يوم الأربعاء مستحل Rajab, that he passed away on the day of Wednesday, the first of Rajab, the first day of Rajab in the year 218. And we just mentioned the detailed incident and the trial and tribulation he went through with Mamun and the misguided, deviated sect of the Mu'tazila that were a cause for his death, where he passed away in the city of Baghdad, in the jail and the dungeons of the Abbasid dynasty, after spending 100 days approximately of his life under that severe trial and test. And he lived for a period of 78 years. We said he was born in the year 140 after the Hijrah, passing away in the year 218. So he lived for a period of 78 years. رحم الله الإمام أبا مسهر وأجزاه عنا وعن المسلمين خير الجزاء وأسكنه فسيح جناتي. If there are any questions, then we can address them inshallah.
The Mu'tazila, because they believe that Quran is created, does that affect how they understand the Quran or anything, or is that just the belief and after that nothing matters?
The various sects, especially the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah and their offshoots, then they have based their beliefs upon intellect and ilmul kalam and rhetoric and Greek philosophy, etc. They have accepted these beliefs from the disbelievers, from the Greek philosophers and the people of rhetoric and other than them. And they have caused them to go far away astray in these beliefs. So the Quran near them, it is not held in the same regard that it is held near Ahlul Sunnah, Ahlul Hadith, the safe sect, the aided group, that Allah Ta'ala has ordered the Muslims to rule with the Quran and return back to the Quran in all matters of life. Near these people, the Quran, as we mentioned, it is created. It is not the speech of Allah Azza wa Jal. And their Greek philosophy and rhetoric, that is what takes precedence over the Quran. And this, as we mentioned, is a belief of kufr, of disbelief. And the scholars have unified in deeming that the one who deems the Quran to be created, not an attribute, a speech of Allah Azza wa Jal, then he has disbelieved. In the Quran. No.
When they say that it is created, they consider it as created by Allah, right?
They consider it not to be the speech of Allah Azza wa Jal. They consider it not to be the speech of Allah Azza wa Jal. And they consider it to be created just like the remaining creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. The Creator has created everything that exists. Allah Ta'ala has created everything that exists. Allah Ta'ala has attributes. Allah Ta'ala has names and attributes. From His attributes is that Allah Ta'ala, He sees and He speaks and He hears. As has come in the Quran and the Sunnah, Allah Ta'ala is As-Sami', He hears. Allah Ta'ala is Al-Basir, He sees. Allah Ta'ala speaks. These Mu'tazila Jahmiyyah, they deem these attributes to be the same attributes as the creation. They link these attributes to the attributes of the creation. That if Allah Ta'ala is describing Himself with being that He speaks and He sees and He hears, then we, the humans, also speak. We also hear. We also see. So this misguidance led them to negate these attributes that Allah Ta'ala does not speak. He does not see. He does not hear. He has no attributes. To the point that we mentioned in our previous classes, the Salaf, the ulama of the Salaf, they mentioned that the Mu'tazila Jahmiyyah, they believe or they worship a Lord that does not exist. They worship a Lord that does not exist. Near Him, He has no attributes. Allah Ta'ala, Lord of the heavens and the earth, He has no attributes. He does not exist. He does not exist. So, the Creator, He has attributes that He has informed us in His speech, in His revelation in the Quran and in the Sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ has informed us of. And it is obligatory upon the Muslims to believe in these attributes according to their apparent meanings. According to their apparent meanings, and believe that laysa kamithlihi shay, that Allah Ta'ala speaks, He sees, He hears, He sees, but His speech and His hearing and His seeing is not like the speech and the hearing and the listening of anything else. Nothing resembles it. There's no resemblance to it. There's no resemblance to it.
We've seen that like the scholars of Ahl-Sunnah, they have been very strict against the Mu'tazila and Jahmiyyah. But like later on now we see that against like the Ashaira, who are like kind of Jahmiyyah, except that they agree with the 7 Sifat. There has been like now people who are trying to claim that they are also like part of Ahl-Sunnah, and there is not much difference. It's like the madhab of fiqh, every kind can be different. So how did this leniency come?
The Ashaira, they came into existence much after the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila. As we just mentioned, the Mu'tazila, they came into existence at the time of the Tabi'een. At the time of the Tabi'een. And then the offshoot, Jahmiyyah, they also, Jahm ibn Safwan came immediately after, at the end of the Tabi'een, at about Tabi'een. The Ashaira, they took some beliefs of various groups and sects that preceded them, and Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari, he made this creed, and he also went towards various levels and stages in his life. He was firstly upon the creed of the Jahmiyyah, Mu'tazila, then he adopted the creed of the Kullabiyya, which was also a sect, a misguided sect. Then he presented this creed of that is attributed to him today, the Ash'ari creed. Then near the end of his life, he recanted and he returned back to the creed of Ahlul Sunnah, of Ahlul Hadith, in which he wrote his book Al-Ibana, which is well known and amongst us. So the creed that is attributed to him is the creed in which he has did ta'wil. He has did ta'wil, misinterpretation of all of the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal except 7 attributes. 7 attributes they affirm according to the apparent meanings, because they claim that without these attributes or in these attributes there's no tashbih, there's no resemblance to the creation. But the other attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal, other than these 7 attributes, they make ta'wil of. They make away their meanings and they distort them and they misinterpret them to run away and avoid tashbih that they claim that affirming these attributes creates resemblance with the creation. Resemblance with the creation. And the scholars, since this belief has come into existence, have ruled upon them to be innovated, misguided belief, and this creed to be a creed in opposition and contradiction to the creed of the Salaf, the creed of the Ahlul Hadith and the Salaf. As far as the people today, or people claiming that they are just a school of thought or a madhab, then without a doubt this is extreme leniency, and this claim is a deviated claim. The Ash'aris are misguided. They are people of innovation. Their creed is in contradiction, opposition to the creed of all of the Imams of the Salaf, the Imams of Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah. And the scholars, they have differentiated them from the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah, without a doubt. The Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, as we just mentioned, all of the scholars have unanimously said that they are kuffar, they are disbelievers, because they negate every single attribute of Allah Azza wa Jal. They do not affirm any attribute to Allah Azza wa Jal. They negate every attribute. The Ash'aris, as we just mentioned, they affirm 7 attributes and they distort the meanings of the remaining attributes. So the scholars of Islam, they do not rule upon them with the same ruling as the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila to be kuffar, to be disbelievers. But without a doubt, this is a misguided, deviant belief that none of the scholars of the Salaf, from the Sahaba, from the Tabi'een, from the Atba'u Tabi'een, these great Imams of Islam were upon. And their creed has opposed the Quran and the Sunnah and the Ijma of the Muslims and the Aqidah and the creed of the Salaf, without a doubt. Are there any other questions? If there are no questions, we'll end our session here, inshallah. Wallahu ta'ala alam wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathira.